In this activity, we are going to be looking at the periodicity of properties of elements. So we know that the periodic table is an arrangement of elements based on their atomic number, and there are many measurements that help us to predict the chemical behavior of an element. What we're going to do is we're going to plot ionization energy versus atomic number, and we're going to also plot atomic radius versus atomic number for the first 36 elements on the periodic table, and we're going to observe if there are any regularities of these properties. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through how to complete your first graph, and when you are done, you're going to upload both graphs to the Dropbox. So let's get started. This is the instruction sheet that you will find, and it has some of the written information and how to go about creating that graph. But I'm also going to walk you through how to create that graph on a Google Sheets program. So, what you need to do is you need to go to your drive and you need to click on New and go to Google Sheets. So, that's the first thing that you need to do. You have to open up a spreadsheet program. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to obviously give this spreadsheet a title. And the reason why you're going to give that a title is so that you can easily find it in your drive later on. So let's just call this graphical data for trends in the periodic table. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to have to use data that I've given to you. So on your sheet, if you go to the very last page, you're going to see the atomic number. So remember, atomic number 1 corresponds to hydrogen. Atomic number 2 is helium. Atomic number 3 is lithium, and so forth. We're going to plot atomic number versus atomic radii first. Okay, radii, remember, is just we're talking about the size, the distance from the nucleus to the outermost boundary of the atom. The larger that distance is, the bigger the atom is going to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to allocate column A to the x-axis. So in a spreadsheet program, column A is the x-axis, and row 1 we devote to the titles. So here I'm going to type in atomic number. And then in column B, I'm going to put in atomic radii. Okay. And the units are nanometers because nanometers is a reasonable unit to measure atoms in because they're so small. There are a billion nanometers in a meter. Clearly, it wouldn't make sense to use centimeters here, even millimeters. So we use nanometers. Now, if I just want to extend that column a little bit, I can just drag that over. Because we are plotting the first 36, what you're going to do is numbers all the way to 36 going down column A. And again, you may want to pause this video at any time. So all the way number 1 to 36 in column A. The next thing that you need to do is you need to take the numbers that correspond in terms of the radii, so 0.037, and it can be a little bit tedious. If you can print this off, it might be easier instead of going back and forth. 0.054 and so forth. What you don't want to do is you do not want to put units beside your numerical value. If you do that in a spreadsheet program, you will not be able to get good points being plotted because there's an error that happens. So just numerical values, the units we allocate just to the title. Okay, so once you are done all of that, you are going to have everything inputted. So everything is inputted. Okay, then we want to create our graph. So what I do is I'm going to highlight the column. And then I'm going to use my insert. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can insert a graph. So you can click the insert tab above and it'll say insert chart, or there should be a quick functionality here where you can click insert chart. Now, what we want to do is we want to make sure that a line chart. Now, sometimes it'll pick another type of chart. For this particular graph, I want it to be a line chart. So far, so good. We also want to make sure we're in the setup portion of the graph that you have these two boxes at the bottom clicked. It'll say use row 1 as headers, okay, and use column A as labels. So here, what it does is it takes row 1 and it gives us the axis titles that we need, okay, and we want to make sure that our y-axis has the units there, and atomic number, there are no units, so we just use that. So far, so good. Now we're going to customize our graph a little bit. So when I click on customize, what I would like you to do, I'd like you to double click the chart title right now. And so I'm just clicking on there, and I'd like you to add your initials. So I know that this is coming from you. And so this is your initials on this graph. Okay, so far so good. Now under customize, you're going to see this heading called series. I'd like you to click on series, please. And when we click on series, I'd like you to see and scroll down where it says point size, and it'll say none. I'd like you to change that to 7 or 2. Doesn't really matter, but we want these points to show up so that I know that this is atomic number 1. This is atomic number 2. So I know that this is hydrogen, this is helium, this is lithium. Every point corresponds to one of your elements, right? And the elements are numbers 1 to 36. So this looks pretty good so far. The next thing that I'd like you to do is click on the 3 dots that are on your graph here. So we're done with customizing right now. Okay, so we don't need anything else. But when you click on your graph, there are these 3 dots, and you can move it to its own sheet. Okay, so that's perfect. You can see that, so it's a little bit bigger. Okay, nicely done. Now, what you're going to have to do is we're going to have to take this chart. So I'm going to copy this chart, click copy. Okay, and I'm going to have to go back to my drive, and I need to open up Google Drawing. So you need to go to Google Drawing. Unless you have the functionality and you want to print this graph and do this next part written, you can do that as well. So I've opened up my Google Drawing, and I should be able to paste that graph. I'm just going to click paste right into my Google Drawing. So what I'm going to ask you to do at this point in time is we have to label the peaks on the graph and the valleys on the graph. So I'm just going to grab a text box. So you grab a text box, and then what I'd like you to do at the peak here, I'd like you to label what element that is. When I count the dots, that's element number 3. So I'm going to put down Li in the text box, and that is lithium. Okay, and that happens to label the peaks. I only want the peaks and I only want the valleys labeled. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to grab another text box, and that will go here. You will label that peak, and you will also label this peak over here. Okay, so I'm just going to put a shape around it, but you need to know, and you can even leave the shape in there, that these are the peaks that I'm looking for, and I'm also looking for you to label the valleys, so the ones at the lowest point. So maybe I'll just get a circle for the valleys. So this is considered to be a valley right here. So whatever element that is, element number 10. And this is also a valley here. So we're looking at the end of each row. So right there, I need to know what element that is. And also at the very end, that would be the end of a run. So right there, okay? So this is also a peak. We've already labeled that one as lithium, so I'll move that back to where it needs to be, and clearly it should not be upside down. So there we go. All right. So we've got all of the peaks labeled and all of the valleys labeled as well. Then what you need to do, obviously give this a title, okay? So maybe graph 1, okay? You can be a little bit more specific if you'd like. You need to download this as a PDF, okay? And if you don't, then what ends up happening is it may get distorted once it's uploaded to the drive. So download it as a PDF first and then upload this graph to the drive. The next thing that you need to do is the second graph. Okay, in this second graph, I'm not going to be doing with you, but what is this graph here? Well, this graph here is going to be atomic number for the first 36 elements and then ionization energy. Remember that those values are located on this chart. You're going to do the exact same thing, but for graph number 2. Once you've got both graphs completed, there are the follow-up analysis questions that you need to do that go with these 2 graphs. Okay, so there's going to be a drop box for the graphs. So there'll be 2 graphs inserted there. And then the follow-up questions will be in a separate drop box. And that's what these are, the analysis questions. So on the peaks for atomic radius, okay, what is the family that represents those peaks? And then you can answer. You don't have to answer in full sentences for this, okay, so not to worry, but you want to do good analysis of your graphs. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to reach out.